Muy buenas tardes, un gusto saludarles. En nombre de la UNAD, Universidad Nacional Abierta y a Distancia, INVIL, SEAD Medellín, les damos la más cordial bienvenida a esta conferencia, donde les presentaremos al señor Luca Tommaso Catullo MacIntyre. Nacido en Italia, sus padres de Italia y Escocia, se crió en Inglaterra e Italia. Es doctor en filosofía de la línea Sociología de la Literatura, historiador y filólogo especializado en historia, también cultura británica con pregrado en lenguas y literaturas extranjeras. Tendremos la conferencia sobre la historia de la lengua inglesa desde sus orígenes hasta el siglo XVII.
Muchas gracias. Esta será la introducción en idioma inglés. Welcome to this conference. Dr. Luca Tommaso Catullo MacIntyre was born in Italy. His parents from Italy and Scotland, but he grew up between England and Italy. He's a doctor in philosophy with emphasis in sociology of literature. He's a historian, philologist, specialized in history and British culture with a degree in languages and foreign literatures. This conference is going to be about the history of the English language from its very beginnings until 17th century. Thank you and welcome.
Le damos la cordial bienvenida al docente Luca.
So welcome everybody. Can you clearly hear me? Yes. Right. Today's presentation or lecture wants to outline in 60 minutes, which is quite a hard task, the history of English from its origins until the 17th century, which means William Shakespeare's age. Well, so let's get cracking. As you can see here in this chart, we have a rough depiction of what the history of English was and is from the Celtic migrations in the 6th and 7th century. The Celts were different tribes living in Central Europe, and at certain point they decided to migrate, some of them north, some others south. They also reached places such as Turkey or Ukraine, Russia, but most of them, the ones known as Celts, are mainly related to the British Isles. So as you can see in this chart, there is, let's say, a timeline of different happenings in British history. Right, and this is today's syllabus. All the matters, all the things we will be discussing about, starting from Celtic languages, heritage in today's English, then the Roman age and the Latin, the Anglo-Saxon period, language education and main characters, the influence of Old Norse in the English language, with some specific case studies, French words in the English language, and the great vowel shift, which is something that brutally and completely changed our understanding of English. And last but not least, Shakespeare's OP, which means original pronunciation. Okay, and here we've got, let's say, a rough depiction with some statistics and percentages of what English is today. Today we can state that 29% of the words spoken come from the French, 29% from the Latin, then 29%, 26% from Germanic languages. But if you carefully take a look at the chart, we also have here Greek, 6%, as you can see it here. So what do Greek have to do with Latin cultures or with the British Isles? The Greek were conquered by the Romans, and so the Romans exported many words, many features in terms of culture. We do have, for instance, two very common in use words in English that are cinema and theater, which origin is Greek. So in the next slides, we will take a look at it. Of course, we also have 4% of what we call derived from proper names, also Celtic heritage in the English language. And here we have a possible depiction of what the Celtic Britain should have appeared in the 1st century. Very important. Why Celtic? Because the Greek called them Keltoi, whose meaning is barbarians. So this Keltoi turned into the English language as Celtic for the adjective and Celts, the Celts for the population. So we can say that all these peoples in plural, we can say, all these tribes invaded the British Isles, but without a real organization. We cannot say that there was a Celtic invasion, but there were tribes living in different places and like in neighborhoods for cities. Like today we have New York, which has different neighborhoods, the Italian side, the Latin side, the Chinese side. So in other words, we can say that there was no organized Celtic invasion. And these people commenced appearing on the British Isles in the 6th and 7th century until approximately the year 50 AD. 50 AD is an important year in history because it is the year in which we can say that the city of London was firstly founded. The Roman called them Londinium. And here we have a slide regarding the Celtic languages. As you can see, we have two different slides together, two different charts. Nowadays, we do have 6 Celtic languages still spoken at present. Of course, the percentage is very low. Most of them can hold 1 or 2% of the population. But the relevant thing is that governments are trying to keep these languages alive more and more. So on your left, as you may observe, we have a rough distinction between let's say 2 different blocks. On the one hand, we have the Brittonic Celtic, we can say Welsh, Breton, and Cornish. So if you take a look at your right, as you can see, we have Welsh, Breton, and Cornish is here in Cornwall. Okay, all these languages belong to, for instance, important characters such as King Arthur. King Arthur was a Brittonic leader who fought the Anglo-Saxon, and after his death, the Brittonics were pushed, let's say, west from the Anglo-Saxons. And on the other hand, we got the Gallic or Gaelic Celtic. Why Gaelic and Gaelic? Because in Scotland, we normally say Scottish Gaelic, and in Ireland, they say Gaelic Irish. Also, we do have the Manx, the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man is an island between England and Ireland, which has a language called Manx, a Celtic language. So Today we do have 6 Celtic languages and not dialect. These languages still survive, and we can claim that they are more and more alive, especially nowadays with YouTube. We can also have the chance to receive some classes. Right, and the Roman period changes this Celtic dominance of the island. So the Romans arrived there in the year 43 AD, even though they had arrived 1 century before under Julius Caesar, but they couldn't really conquer all the territory. So they stayed around 4 centuries until approximately 406 or 410, time in which Rome was under siege by the barbaric population, especially Germanic population. So the Romans recalled all the legions home, and this is why we can say that they stayed 4 centuries, but they contributed notably with new developments in agriculture, urbanization, industry, and architecture, as well as for the language. Latin is nowadays present in the English language. So why Britannia? Why Britain? Why Great Britain? The Greek have something to do. The Greek used to call these islands, the island which is now part of Great Britain, so where we nowadays have Wales, England, and Scotland, they call them Pretanike in Greek, and they call this population Pretani. So that's why the Latinization of this native Greek noun turned into Britannia, which is represented by a goddess. As you can see, this goddess has a helmet, a spear, and a shield in a very ancestral Greek mood. And in the following slide, we also have the ancient names of these 3 nowadays UK countries. England, England's ancient name was Albion because this possibly may have given rise to the name from the name Albion, from the Greek name, because Albion means white. And when we arrive, nowadays we have a train, well, we have the Channel Tunnel, which is a train, an undersea train which connects England and France. But I mean, the first look that England had and has, depending on, of course, on where we go, from where we go, is reaching the shores of the city of Dover. And here we have the so-called White Cliffs. So the first impression of England was the White Cliffs of Dover at the time, arriving from France. So this white may have given rise to the name Albion. On the other hand, in Scotland, the ancestral language is Gaelic. In Gaelic, the translation of Albion is Alba. So nowadays we can also say, we can also call Scotland as Alba. And Hibernia, which is Ireland, it has been taken from Greek geographical accounts. Then we have another country, as you can see, the green one over here. This is the Celtic name of Wales. If you read it, possibly we read it Cymru, but in Gaelic we say Camry. So there's a different pronunciation. Moving to the next slide. Here we have an outstanding construction left and still possible to visit nowadays, made by the Romans, made by under the Emperor Hadrian. who in the year 122 built a 118 miles wall from the north of England to protect the legions from England to Scotland. Scotland was called Caledonia by the Romans. And normally this population mainly depicts successively the Scots were absolutely warlike, so tended to attack the Roman legions in, let's say, in a row continuously. That's why this wall, which is possible to be visited, if you go to England, to the north of England, the reference city is Carlisle, which is a city near the border with Scotland. We do have the Hadrian's Wall. 20 years later, the following emperor, Antonine, decided to build another wall to like another trench wall, but this wall is nowadays just a leap of ruins. And here we have the Latin heritage in English cities' names. Today we are focusing on the UK, but of course, possibly in another session, we can focus on English names in English countries, such as the United States, Australia, New Zealand, for instance, Canada, right? But that's why we could possibly find these names, these cities' names also in other countries. But it's amazing to realize how the suffixes Chester, Castor, and Cester have to do with Latin suffixes. So these are related mainly to castrum. Castrum was like a fortress, a defensive fortress, military camp of force. So we got some of them. We got Chester. Possibly in this part of the world, pronunciation of ER is more R because the influence is more North American. So an American would say Chester, but I mean in Britain we do say Chester, Chesterfield, Cirencester, Colchester, Chichester, Doncaster, and more. Very important to take a look at this city, which is normally misspelled out of the UK. Pronunciation is Leicester, Leicester. People tend to say Leicester, but it's not Leicester, it's Leicester. We've got Manchester, Winchester, and more. And in the following one, we can also appreciate now how this everything changes from the Roman retreat to Rome. We do have on your right, you can observe populations from today's Denmark, Denmark here, Jutes, Angles, the border between the Jutes and, between Denmark and Germany, Saxon, North Germany, Frisians, the Netherlands. These populations decided to invade the British Isles. In the British Isles at that time, having left the Roman, we found Roman Brittonic. King Arthur was a Roman Brittonic. King Arthur lived at the end of the 5th century. What we know about King Arthur is that he was wounded and then he died in battle in the year 536. At the time, we have two important historians. We have Bede and Gildas, and they stated that, well, first of all, here where you can appreciate Angles is nowadays where we have possibly the northern city in Germany called Kiel. Kiel is a city very near to the Danish border. There was a place called Angeln, where it is possible, we can assume that most of this population had its start to invade England. To invade, at the time we cannot say, we couldn't say England, we could say the British Isles, with these different kingdoms of East Anglia, Mercia, Wessex, Northumbria, and so on. So all this population, let's say, it's like if nowadays we could speak about Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands attacked the British Isles and had to face the Brittonic under King Arthur. King Arthur was had an important role because he could unite all the Brittonic population to face and to fight the Anglo-Saxons. But it is important to underline that the Anglo-Saxon population never spoke or wrote about themselves as we are the Anglo-Saxons. They just called them West Sixna. Sixna meaning could have been related to the knives, to show the knives that we had. But I mean, there's no a real certainty about that. And after some century, Alfred the Great, if you have seen the series Viking, you can see this figure. Alfred the Great could face and defeat the Viking invasions. And so he is important because he was the first, possibly, in translated the Bible from Latin into Old English. He pushed Christianity. He promoted primary education. And under him, for the first time in history, in British history, we heard the name, the noun, the name England, similar to Englaland, so land of the Angles, possibly in the year 896. A great achievement of him was after suffering several defeats, he could face and defeat the Viking king Guthrum in the Battle of Edington in the year 878. And as you can see here, we have, let's say, we have this island split into two parts. We don't consider Scotland, which is something apart, but as you can see, the clearer colors are for the Danish, so the Viking settlements. Alfred the Great, after defeating Guthrum, reached an agreement with the Viking, let's say bestowing them land, and the idea was to live in peace. So on the one hand, we have the Viking kingdoms until the north of England, York, as you can see. And on the other hand, we have the Saxon kingdom. And this peace, let's say, had its ups and downs, but I mean, in the end, it was successful, we can say. But of course, in terms of language spoken had a clash of culture. So many Old Norse words enter into the Anglo-Saxon words, so in the English language at that time. And continuing with this is our reference. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles is a collection of annals written in Old English. Important to say that starting from the Anglo-Saxon period, we can say that in literature, in linguistics, we can call this period Old English period. Okay, so that was created possibly in the 9th century. 9 manuscripts still survive nowadays. And in this audio, you can appreciate there is, let's say, a speaker who imitates or speaks with the 975 accents. So there is the English translation, but I would like you to pay attention, to pay heed to the sounds, and possibly you would understand how the English language has developed.
Hier je ändoded Erthandremas Edgar, Engla Kynning, Cheas him otherlecht, Willity and winsome, and this watche forlet, leaf this lane. Nemnath leoda baird men on molden, thane moneth je huer in thisse ethelturf, da they waren, on rimkrafte, rykte je togene, Julius monoth, there se gonga je wat, on thone actethen die, Edgar of Life, berne berchife. Feng his beren sithan, tol kuniricha, child unwaxen, la eldor, tham was Edward nama. Und him tierfest haleth, tin nichtam of Britannia Jawat, bishop Segoda, thorke kudne kraft, tham was kuniwe.
So if you are into the series Viking, you can appreciate in some parts all English speakers. So 975, we assume that the so-called British people, Anglo-Saxon period people could have spoken like that. And here we got some heritage in terms of words. On your left, you may see how the part of the bodies were named or described. There's such a likeness, but not exactly, they're not exactly the same. On your right, there are some of the most relevant words from the Anglo-Saxon heritage. Here we got some toponyms. Toponyms, for the ones who are not into the etymology, means names of cities or places. Okay, so we do have Birmingham. Birmingham nowadays is the second city of England in terms of inhabitants after London. So Birmingham could have been named after Beorma, an Anglo-Saxon man. And well, there are different place name elements. So I let you check just 30 seconds without saying anything. It's important to take a look at it. Right. So the Viking Age. So far, we have seen three different cultural influence, three different invasions: Celtic, Roman with Latin, and the Anglo-Saxon. Now, this is the fourth one. The Viking Age starts in the year 793 when a group of Vikings attack exactly this place here. Was a monastery called Lindisfarne. Was a monastery full of priests, and they were absolutely slaughtered because, of course, their religious creed, the religious belief was against the Viking belief. So they were mainly slaughtered, and some other were taken as prisoners to be enslaved. So the Viking Age can be defined between the end of the 8th century and the beginning of the 11th. First and foremost, the Vikings, they are said to have been the first really explorers of the Americas, but they never settled down. That's why we attributed this to Cristoforo Colombo. But they reached different shores. So from north to south, Iceland, Normandy, Ireland, Russia, Scotland, and so on. Why did they move? Because their land was not fertile, and the British Isles are truly fertile nowadays. 75% nowadays in the 20th century, 75% of the British land is fertile. So the main reason for these warriors was at the beginning to make pillage, but then we saw it with the Danelaw. They tended to establish, to settle down, and to be farmers. Okay, so also the overpopulation contributed to these trips. Well, this is a bit thick. I just put it just to let you read, because we have several, let's say, several options to define what Viking means, what the ethnonym. When we say ethnonym, we refer to the name of the the ethnic name related to ethnic. So I highlighted some important things, so you may take a look. One etymology could be the could derive from the feminine name Vic, which is bay, as they had their ships, their boats in bays. They could have been defined according to it. Secondly, could have been for the Norwegian coast. Let's remember that when we say Vikings, we mean people, Scandinavian people from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Possibly at that time, the ones who really attacked more were Norse, were from Norway. The third option could have been Vika, in the sense of withdraw. So because they attack, they meet pillage, and they withdraw. So could be an explanation. The fourth, that's a French word, detour. Detour, we use it in English, but comes from the French, one of the 29% words coming from there. So detour from home, like returning home. The fifth, Vikia, journey abroad. The sixth, Vitian. I guess the W in Germanic language is pronounced B, not W like in English. So these are the options, the possible options. And after making pillage, after attacking, after centuries of war versus the Anglo-Saxon, finally, some of them, especially with the Danelaw in the 9th century, they could mix up with the Anglo-Saxon. And we do have, in 1016, we do have the first Viking king in England. And the British, well, the English called him Canute. The real name was Knut. He reigned until 1036, 19 years. And we observe as most of the words we have from them are extremely related to violence. So ransack, die, slaughter, hate, angry, thump, gun. We also have, of course, softer words such as cake, choose, both, egg, and so on. Heathen, which means pagan, is a word from the Viking heritage. And in the following slide, we have a short video, funny video. It's a program if you're interested in watching it. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Horrible Histories. It's a British program talking about British history and literature in a truthful but funny way. So just take 1 minute and something.
Vicious Vikings! Words we get from the Vikings. Anger! Berserk! Die! Cake! Oh, thank you very much. Rotten! Mistake. Hit!
If you got injured in Viking times.
And here we got Viking toponyms. The first one is York. In the United States, we have, I mean, they say New York, so new, they don't say new. This is for another session. We would explain why there is a different pronunciation in some words or letters. But the New York, or New York, as they say, we have there, it's not for the city of York, it's for, it was named after James Stuart, James II, King of England in the 17th century. It was James Stuart, so James of York. York, if we start from the Roman time, as you can see there, the Roman called the city Eboracum. The Anglo-Saxon turned it into Eoforvik, and the Viking called him Jorvik. Nowadays, it's York. York is a marvelous northern city, northern English city. If you go there, I truly recommend, let's say, taking sightseeing. It's a very special city. So here we do have different ones. There is one, number 5, Tintagel, as you can see there. Tintagel is the place in which it is thought that the round table of King Arthur could have existed, Tintagel in Cornwall. Do you remember we spoke about the Celtic languages, one of them, the Cornish from Cornwall, so Tintagel is a place there, right? Then we have this, we find this suffix by, but it's not pronounced by when we apply to a name, to a noun. So we have the city of Derby in Derbyshire. We have Grimsby and we have Whitby. So there are many more, but time is short and these are the most relevant. And something happened. A turning point in English history is the year 1066. The previous Anglo-Saxon king, whose name was Edward the Confessor, died, passed away in some months before 1066 without leaving any heir. He didn't have any children. So he had a brother-in-law who was an important Anglo-Saxon nobleman. His name was Harold Godwinson. And Harold assumed that he had to take the throne. But on the other hand, Edward the Confessor, King of England, had a cousin in France, in the region of Normandy, in the north of France. And he was William, Duke of Normandy, also known as William the Bastard because of his unclear origins. So once Edward the Confessor passed away, Harold Godwinson took the throne after taking a note to William. William got furious and decided to invade England, attacking the Anglo-Saxon. Here we have, this is from the Wax Museum in London. Right, we can move on. So the etymology of Norman, we can realize how the Vikings have to do with such an etymology, because this can come from Northman, so from Old Norse. Let's say in the 9th century, the Viking invaded Paris several times, invaded France several times. So they also, some of them mix up with the French culture, especially the northern one. So they attacked England in 1066 with a fleet. Exactly on the 14th October 1066, they attacked England with a fleet of 7,000 men. They were outnumbered. The Anglo-Saxons were more, but the Anglo-Saxons had fought against the Vikings some days before, so they were extremely tired. They had to march from north to south to face them. And we find this important battle which changed English history, the English history, in the Bayeux Tapestry. Tapestry in Spanish can be translated like as tapiz, el tapiz de Bayeux. Bayeux is a place in France. It is an embroidered woolen canvas over 70 meters long. If you go to the Louvre Museum in Paris, you can see it. And this canvas depicts the issues before the Battle of Hastings, during and after the Battle of Hastings. We can have, thank you to, because of technology, thank you to technology, we do have something which is called the animated Bayeux Tapestry, which is worth being, let's say, watched for 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, this is a rough depiction of the battle. The Anglo-Saxons expected the Normans from a hill. They had more soldiers than them, so the Normans were outnumbered, but they could win finally. And we could see in the next video the animated bio tapestry, which depicts, represents, shows the issues related to this conflict. What England would have been, England and the UK, what would they have been if the Anglo-Saxon would have won? Possibly we wouldn't have had any French influence in terms of words. From there on until, let's say, the 14th century, the language spoken by the elite was French. So the Anglo-Saxon royalty was completely annihilated, and they remained, let's say, mainly people in charge of the land, like peasants. And in church, the language spoken was still Latin. So have you ever wondered why in English, regarding animals, we can have two different names? For instance, pig and pork. One is the animal, the other is the meat, the flesh. Turkey and peacock, for instance, because there was not, let's say, a dictionary of the language at that time. So the Anglo-Saxon remain with their words, and the French Norman, developed other words. Here we got some words we got from the French. So allowance from allowance, heritage, héritage, laissez-faire, massage, we still say, I need a massage in English. Chauffeur, champagne, and so on. Dossier, chic. Okay, the last part of the session is with regard to the great vowel shift. English is sometimes, for foreigners, an illogical language. There are some pronunciations which have a way, some other have another way. There's a city in the south of England, it's Portsmouth or Bournemouth. The suffix is mouth, so why cannot we say Portsmouth or Bournemouth? Because there is a historical issue called the Great Vowel Shift. The Great Vowel Shift represents a change in pronunciation between the 15th century and the 17th century. Now we will take a look at the historical happenings which determine this, but a pronunciation of the 1400s about the word bite could have been bit, then bait. In the following century, bait and bite. How these have changed. In the following slide, we would observe the causes. Main cause is the Black Death. Between 1346 and 1353, this pandemic issue stopped the whole world. So the whole, let's say, well, we cannot say the whole world. Let's say the European world and more, the Asian world as well. So due to it, there was population migration. So people escaped, moved from north to south, south to north. So there was a clash of dialects, clash of accents. It's not like nowadays that we have YouTube or Duolingo or stuff like that. So this pronunciation could have been modified by this terrible event. Second event, at the same time, the 100-year war versus France. The French was the elite language in England, but having this war with France, this provoked a general anti-French sentiment. So why shall we pronounce French word if we are in England? So people started pronouncing French word in another way. But at the same time, the high class, the upper class wanted to keep the French, just a target of importance, just to distinguish themselves. And of course, we have middle class hypercorrection, which is also another issue. And our last slide is about a video we moved from. So we started with the Old English period. We started from the Old English period. Then we moved with the Norman conquest, we moved to the Middle English period. Now, with the age of William Shakespeare, around 1500, even though William Shakespeare was born 1564, we can say that we do have the so-called early modern English period.
The Globe Theatre.
Until 1800. William Shakespeare is said to have invented, or let's say gifted 190 words into the English language, new words. This is the Globe Theatre. The video takes 10 minutes, but we will take a look at the first 3 or 4 just to show you some difference in reading some Shakespearean works with that accent and not with this accent.
Which opened in 1994, very near to its former site, specialises in original productions of Shakespeare. But it wasn't until 2004 that a play was performed in the original pronunciation, known as OP. The play was Romeo and Juliet.
Well, the Globe is known for its original practices. This is why it is here, to try and recreate the theatre as it was in 1600 and thereabouts. And when they started it off, they decided to do original costume, original music with original instruments, original movement around the stage and so on. But they never did original pronunciation because they thought, quite wrongly, but understandably, they thought nobody would understand it. But it was a very, very successful occasion. The seats were packed for that weekend. Everybody loved it. And it was such a success that the Globe then decided to do a second production the following year, production of Troilus and Cressida.
It transports you back through the centuries. It's a very magical, almost hair-raising experience, especially in this space, to hear that accent, a space that's sort of as close as we can get to a 400-year-old theatre, and then an accent that's as close as we can get to a 400-year-old accent with a 400-year-old play. If anything, it rounds the experience of going to see a Shakespeare play out.
Any period in the history of the English language can be studied from the point of view of how it was pronounced at the time. Old English, Chaucer, and so on. In relation to Shakespeare, we're talking about the sound system or phonology that was in use in a period called early modern English, and in the period specifically around about the year 1600. Now, it's a period during which pronunciation was changing very, very rapidly. So there isn't just one kind of OP. There's an OP that evolves throughout the period. For example, early on in the period, people were pronouncing the word musician as musician, musician. Later in the period, it had evolved into musician. And of course, later still, it became musician.
David Crystal and his son Ben regularly work together to demonstrate how original pronunciation differs from modern pronunciation.
It's an interesting accent to tune your ear into. So we're going to run through a few pieces of Shakespeare, first in a modern sort of received pronunciation accent, the accent that you're used to hearing Shakespeare in, and then we'll switch into original pronunciation. And probably Dad will do some and I'll do some as well, so you get to hear it in a different voice.
Their first example comes from Henry V. Ben gives the modern pronunciation, and David the OP.
Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention.
Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention.
A kingdom for a stage, princes to act and monarchs to behold the swelling scene.
A kingdom for a stage, princes to act and monarchs to behold the swelling scene.
Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars.
Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars.
And at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword and fire crouch for employment.
And at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword and fire crouch for employment.
How do you know that that was original pronunciation?
Well, there are 3 kinds of evidence that you look for when you're working out the pronunciation of a stage in the history of the language. The first and the most important piece of evidence is the observations made by people who are writing on the language at the time. there were several people who actually commented on how words sounded, which words rhymed, and so on. For example, how do we know that the R is pronounced at such a time? Well, Ben Jonson, the dramatist, actually tells us at one point. He says we pronounce the R after a vowel. He actually calls it a doggy sound, grr, or something like that. And so that kind of evidence, where when you look at all the sounds, all the vowels, all the consonants, you put it together, and that's the first kind. The second kind of evidence is the spellings that people use at the time. The spellings were a much better guide to pronunciation then than spelling is today. So at one point in Romeo and Juliet, the word film is spelt P-H-I-L-O-M-E, therefore film, and that's a very important indication. But the third kind of evidence, which is absolutely critical from a dramatic point of view, is that there are rhymes and puns which don't work in modern English that do work in OP. One I remember that we did at the Globe here was the pun that suddenly leapt out at us in the prologue to Romeo and Juliet. You do that one?
Right. So, two households, both alike in dignity, and fair Verona, where we lay our sin, from ancient grudge bred to new mutiny, where civil blood led civil hands unclean. From forth the fatal lines of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers.
So, just as a conclusion, reminding that, as far as David Crystal and his son said, when they tried to work Shakespeare comedies, Shakespeare's plays in the original way, they realized that they lasted 10 minutes less. So as you have seen, there is a word they pronounce, which is stage, coming from the French stage. At the time of Shakespeare, it was possibly pronounced stage. So very important issues to be discussed in another session. These are the principal references. One article of mine, if you're interested in reading it. That's in English, but it has been translated in Spanish. By the way, you will find it in English. David Crystal, possibly, my personal opinion, my favorite linguist and philologist, as well as Peter Trotgill, who was, let's say, a Viking last name, as he stated in some conferences. And so, to be continued soon, possibly, we, let's say, gave some hints and tips from the Celtic age, so 7th century before Christ until the beginning of the 17th century. It's all for today, so should you have any queries or questions, we may provide answers. Thank you very much indeed.
I want to point out about the word migration. Such very ancient word, but very current word. It is clear, we could say, the big influence of migrations have had through history and specifically through language history. They were for many reasons: military reasons, religious reasons, overpopulation reasons, among others. What do you consider and why is the most influential migration, and how do migrations affect the languages, especially English?
So if I understand well, you're asking me why migration are so more important than other issues in terms of development. Migration, definitely. Migration, as you can see, for the great vowel shift. Why did we have migration? People at that time were not into traveling like we think nowadays. Oh, let's have some holiday. They just moved for the land, for resources. So when they moved, it was because of wars, because of the Black Death. on that occasion. So the Black Death was the real cause, the main cause, the principal cause for this great vowel shift. Nowadays, due to the globalization and, well, Americans say globalization, we say globalization, you can observe. So we have words coming in and out from one language into another. And let's say we don't realize it 100% because we are being part of this change still on. But as the process I mentioned is over, I think migration is absolutely the main cause. And of course, I asked everybody, and I asked myself a question: what England and the UK would have been without the Norman invasion? We wouldn't have had any French influence. So different options, different changes. Sometimes, I mean, it's important to wonder about these things. But to answer your question, to be brief, I would say migration is the main part. So thank you very much indeed. Again, thanks for joining our event. Hopefully next events in different languages. Los invitamos el día 6 de mayo a un evento en italiano que luego promocionaremos. Vi inviteremo a un evento in italiano il 6 maggio. Verrai pure tú.
Muchas gracias al docente Luca Tommaso Catullo por esta hora donde nos ha brindado enseñanzas importantes de la historia del inglés precisamente. En nombre del INVIL, SEA Medellín, de la UNAD, Universidad Nacional Abierta de Distancia, les extendemos la gratitud. Esperamos que sigan aprovechando estos espacios. A quienes están aquí presentes en el auditorio del SEA Medellín, muchas gracias. Y por supuesto también a quienes se han conectado de forma virtual. Una feliz tarde para todas y para todos.